Hello everyone. Lovely to see you. Kathy was saying that on Facebook the sound comes and goes, and it's been like that for some time. Do tell me if that's your experience of the sound, and I'll see. Working with Facebook is not easy, but I'll see if we can get that fixed. Oh, there's my son Lawrence. Hey, hello Lawrence, nice to see you. Oh, how lovely to see. There are 168 of us coming into the forest clearing now. How wonderful. And it's lovely to think that my son is sitting in the forest clearing too. How nice to hear that. Isabella, who I was with recently near towards Glasgow, she's here as well. Stephanie and I are still in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and we've been having a fantastic time. We've just been immersing ourselves in comedy and plays and music and all sorts of things for the Edinburgh Festival. Hello from Taiwan, North Carolina mountains, from Poole in Dorset, York, York, PA. Is that Pennsylvania? There's a York in Pennsylvania. And Trainee Bard in Ohio, and Goring, Ursula in Goring. Goring, if it's the same Goring I'm thinking about, there's somebody has painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling in a barn or a church hall or somewhere. It's a sort of local site. Not quite as good as Michelangelo's, but or was it Leonardo da Vinci? I can't remember now. But you can see the Sistine Chapel ceiling painted in Goring. And there's Prue and Lewis. Oh, lovely to see everybody here. 227 of us in here now. That's wonderful. Okay. So, you know this idea that they have in monasteries of reading while you're eating. And I think that's a fantastic idea. And I was thinking, I've been walking around Edinburgh so much that my mind is almost completely empty. Jane has just watched the Edinburgh Tattoo. Yes, we've heard the fireworks going off up by the castle every half evening. And I thought, what shall I do in Tea with a Druid? I'll have nothing to say. There's this kind of pressure. Oh, gosh, you've got to think of something to say. But what I know and love about these evenings we have together is that it's more than the words. Very mysterious, isn't it? But somehow there's something about us as human beings that gathering together in awareness and in consciousness, something happens. Something happens in all the audiences we've been in. We went to the most wonderful performance of Gabriel Byrne doing a one-man show. He's talking about his autobiography, just about his life. And so moving and touching. He was just being open and honest and direct. What a fantastic guy. And it was just 2 hours, spellbinding, just wonderful. Something about communication, about talking, about the interplay between silence and words that really satisfies the soul. And in kind of working around that idea, I want to read you a piece of text from a book by David Whyte, the poet. And I'll read it really slowly, and I'll read it with some gaps, and I'll repeat some of the phrases because they're very deep thoughts. And they may resonate with you, or they may not. They may not work for you at all. And see what you think. So this is from a book called Consolations, the solace, nourishment, and underlying meaning of everyday words. And so to really kind of drink these words in, let's just settle for a moment. Breathe out, breathe in, maybe it's a good idea to breathe in, I suppose. Close is what we almost always are. Close to happiness, close to another, close to leaving, close to tears, close to God, Spirit, the great mystery, close to losing faith, close to being done, close to saying something or close to success, and even with the greatest sense of satisfaction, close to giving the whole thing up. Our human essence lies not in arrival, but in being almost there. We are creatures who are on the way. Our journey, a series of impending, anticipated arrivals. We live by unconsciously measuring the inverse distances of our proximity, an intimacy calibrated by the vulnerability we feel in giving up our sense of separation. We live by unconsciously measuring the inverse distances of our proximity, an intimacy calibrated by the vulnerability we feel in giving up our sense of separation. To go beyond our normal identities and become closer than close is to lose our sense of self in temporary joy, a form of arrival that only opens us to deeper forms of intimacy that blur our fixed, controlling surface identity. To consciously become close is a courageous form of unilateral disarmament, a chancing of our arm and our love, a willingness to hazard our affections, and an unconscious declaration that we might be equal to the inevitable loss that the vulnerability of being close will bring. An unconscious declaration that we might be equal to the inevitable loss that the vulnerability of being close will bring. Human beings do not find their essence through fulfillment or eventual arrival, but by staying close to the way they like to travel, to the way they hold the conversation between the ground on which they stand and the horizon to which they go. Human beings do not find their essence through fulfillment or eventual arrival, but by staying close to the way they like to travel, to the way they hold the conversation between the ground on which they stand and the horizon to which they go. We are, in effect, always close to the ultimate secret, that we are more real in our simple wish to find a way than any destination we could reach. The step between not understanding that and understanding that is as close as we get to happiness. Whew. What did you think of that? some of it's hard. I mean, we live by unconsciously measuring the inverse distances of our proximity and intimacy calibrated by the vulnerability. Sometimes, me of the small brain, sometimes I can't quite get that, and then I think about it, and there's something going on here. This is extraordinary. Wow, scary, says Franny. So I just wanted to share that with you because, whoa, says Nancy. Beautiful, says Veronica. Boy, that was deep. Yes, deep. In what words? I think it will need a few meditations. Exactly. Tremendous food for kind of going deeper with that. Powerful, says Perry. Hard to grasp, but then a bit uncomfortably true. So awesomely thrilling, says Jill. Yes. So here's what I love about doing these teas is, it's not about preaching or sort of like knowing the answers, or it's about sharing ideas really, and just having this kind of crazy conversation with each other, to share what inspires us and what is interesting to us. Jane says, I love that. I think I can whoop, boop. Oh, what happened there? I love that. I think if I read it many times over, I will go deeper and deeper and find new thoughts within. Yes. And then, yeah. So, okay. So here's a thought that comes to me. I in the months before my mum died, I used to go and visit her in the nursing home. And sometimes she used to say to me, Phil, I think I'm making progress. And I used to love that. It made me feel warm inside, because at a rational level, you could, of course, say, well, progress towards what? I mean, crikey, you're 98. I mean, like, what do you mean? But there was something very beautiful in it, because she said it with a great deal of happiness. And my feeling was that she was just expressing that sense we have. That was I have it all the time. I think I'm making progress, and if I stop and I ask myself what it means, I don't know what I mean. I mean, progress towards what? But I feel like, I suppose perhaps it's a way of, Émile Coué, the famous French psychologist who came up with this concept. He was really kind of at the source of the idea of affirmations. I think he was actually a chemist or something originally in France in the beginning of the 20th century, I think, and he came up with this idea of repeating positive thoughts that made you feel better. And his famous one was, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. It's as simple as that. And so there's something about being on our way. It was in that piece that I read where he talks about how being on our way gives us more sense of a satisfaction than arriving. And I don't know whether you have this feeling, but I've had for my whole life really this feeling that I'm on my way. And every so often I'll kind of panic and think, but I haven't arrived. I mean, where am I going? And I suppose my sense of arrival has been sort of, I don't know, enlightenment or something like that I'll finally arrive and I'll reach this summit of kind of illumination where I'll just feel fabulous all the time. And I think, now, let me check this out with you, see if you agree with me. And I'm not even sure if I agree with myself, but I've noticed a kind of tendency in certain spiritual writers to talk about an experience of awakening. They'll say, when I was 30 years old, I had an experience of awakening, or it's like a moment when they suddenly got it. And in effect, it's a way of saying when I became enlightened. And everything kind of pivots around that. And that's almost like the imprimatur for one's authority in the spiritual world and the spiritual life. And there's something that I find slightly problematic about that. This may be my own failing, but I'd like to check it out with you. That it seems to propagate some kind of idea that there's a moment that you can arrive. I suppose that's the problem I have with it. It propagates the idea that you can arrive and then you're kind of sorted. Oh yeah, he had his, he essentially became enlightened at that age or at that time. Therefore, everything he or she says from now on is somehow from this vantage point of having arrived. And the rest of us, poor souls, haven't arrived yet. But I suspect, I mean, my sense is that there's this interesting dance between the sense of having arrived, those moments when you feel at peace, when there's nothing to do, nothing to strive for, nothing to get. You're just in the moment now. This is, after all, what mindfulness and meditation is talking about. But there's this ebb and flow between moving and staying still. And that's why pilgrimage is such a powerful practice in spiritual traditions. There's this dance between movement and stillness. So that on a pilgrimage you go, you have an intention, you go towards a destination, and on your way, on this sacred journey, every so often you stop and you pray, or you meditate, or you pause, or you soak in the view. You feel gratitude for life and for being alive and for the wonders of the world. But then you don't stay there forever. You move on. And I suspect that's the same for those people who say they had an experience of awakening. And I'm not doubting them. I don't wish to cast doubt on that at all. But those experiences of awakening, I suspect we all have in different ways. Maybe it's a question of degree. I don't know. But Channel Raven says, I think it's more like a fractal pattern, infinite and ever-changing. Let's have a look. Kailina, I agree with the journey being the part that is what brings happiness, or as close to it as we can get. I can relate to this as someone who has a moving needle for the final destination. I love the journey and I don't want it to ever end. Yes, thank you. The moment, Kale says, the moment of enlightenment for me was more of a sense of finding the path to enlightenment. And that moment happened when I found out about Obod through Dave's album, The Cauldron Born. Hooray! Music, coming through music and then to the Druid path. That's lovely, Kale. Thank you. Yes, we have many arrivals and the journey goes on and on. Yes. Myri Standing Otter. My definition of having arrived is becoming truly teachable, that my belief systems are enough out of the way for me to learn deep substance from the everything in a pleasant way. Oh, how lovely. What a great way to put that. Isn't that wonderful? Yes. And thank you, Myri. And then Kat says, everything is becoming in constant motion. People, planet, even stones are changing. Some things move faster than others. It's like a giant's dance, like a giant dance. And you know the name for Stonehenge is Giant's Dance as well. Yes, let's have a look. Jane says, the day my father passed, he came to a place of peace and calm. He had fought his illness of dementia for a few years. He was a scientist in life, always questioning. But in that last day, he arrived calmly. How lovely. Life is a journey where one can discover and get lost or diverted to pleasant surprises and learnings. Birth and death are the two ends of a long path. Oh, thank you, Jane. That's very beautiful. Thank you. We, yesterday, we went on a fantastic adventure. We drove out to Loch Lomond. And I've driven past Loch Lomond for many years. I mean, 15, at least 15, probably 20 times. Or if you take the return journey, probably double. So probably 40 times in my life, I've driven past Loch Lomond. And it's all looked just like a big loch. Often the weather's been gloomy. On the main road, you drive past a kind of touristy car park, kind of cafe thing. And I never really appreciated it. Yesterday, a fellow Druid, an Obod member, invited Stephanie and I to go sailing on Loch Lomond. So we drove there, and it was utter magic. We arrived in a different place, a quiet place. We took the sailing boat out into the loch. It was a beautiful day. The countryside was just extraordinary. Looking at the Trossachs, looking north up into the highlands, it was just utterly stunning. and we took the boat out into the middle of the loch. The loch is 150 meters deep, very, very deep. And it's the biggest quantity of fresh water in the United Kingdom, apparently. Huge. Peter unfurled the sail, turned off the outboard motor, and we unfurled the sail. And at that point, the wind dropped. And so we just sat in silence with no wind, with the sail up there. And it was just so beautiful and so peaceful. And you know that these big metropolises of Glasgow and Edinburgh, nearby, about an hour's drive each way, busy cities, wonderful cities, full of history and culture. And we'd just spent a week going to stand-up comedy and plays and physical theatre, and the streets are crowded, and there's been a rubbish people strike for 11 days, so there's piles of rubbish everywhere, but it's not as bad as the media. The media makes out that the whole city of Edinburgh is stinking and it's awful, but it's not that awful, actually. Just every so often there's a pile of rubbish. So, but busy, thousands of people. But rich, full of richness. And then here we were in this place of contrast. And it was a pilgrimage, and we went to an island, and then got off the boat on the island and went swimming in Scotland. Would you believe it? And it was fabulous. And we did this, say what you do on a pilgrimage, which is you walk and you stop, you walk and you stop, you arrive. And I think that's what David White, in his quote, when he was talking about this conversation, human beings do not find their essence through fulfillment. Isn't that interesting? Because we spend such a lot of our energy trying to become fulfilled. But he's saying human beings do not find their essence through fulfillment or eventual arrival. Do not find their essence. He's not saying it's bad or that we shouldn't or that it's not a valid goal to find fulfillment. He's not saying that. He's just saying you don't find your essence in that way. You find your essence, like who you really are, by staying close to the way you like to travel, to the way you hold the conversation between the ground on which you stand and the horizon to which you go. The ground on which you stand. So we were standing on this beautiful beach, sitting on this soft golden sand, sitting in the water, in the loch water, standing in the water too. It was lovely. The ground was soft. And then walking up to the hill, walking up to the top of this hill, and then standing again and having this conversation between us as upright beings looking out on this stunning, fantastic scenery. And at the heart of it all, the mystery. Because, of course, a part of us, our minds want to understand, hey, what's going on? What the hell does all this mean? And, how can I draw conclusions? How can I get kind of more illumined than I already am? How can I understand this strange thing called life more? How can I get happier? How can I get more fulfilled? And then this constant whispering of the trees and of the loch saying, it's okay, you don't have to understand everything. You don't have to understand everything. Just open up, let go, be open, enjoy. Sailing, yes, here we go, Elaine. Sailing is a good example of little arrivals as it deals with calms and wind bursts and direction changes to move by the wind. And Ruth is saying, isn't that the beauty of the wheel of the year? It always keeps us moving along the journey of the year, but allowing us to pause and sink into each moment and contemplate the progress of the inner and outer world. On and on, deeper into the spiral, the spiritual life or journey. And thus fulfillment for me is like that, not a single start and destination on a linear line, but a spiral full of many arrivals and awakenings. Thank you, Ruth. That's great. I can see there's loads and loads of wonderful contributions. I am going to finish now. I'm going to finish our tea, and I'm going to make some tea, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to read all your comments and enjoy them. So many, many blessings. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. I look forward to seeing you next Monday evening. In the meanwhile, much love and many blessings. Bye.